Hello, everyone. Let me just change the background all nice and glamorous like that and move my face down a little bit. Hi, everyone in the chats. Hello to those of you watching us on the YouTubes. Hello to those of you watching us on LinkedIn, because we are multi-platform streaming today. Say it like multi-track drifting, if you know that a needlessly niche manga reference that I just made. Welcome to another one of these discipline deep dives, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. Hello. Today, we're going to be doing a discipline deep dive into specifically the world of quality assurance. If this is your first time attending one of these events, I don't blame you. They're relatively new. I think this is our fourth one, maybe our third. I can't even keep count of them anymore. Discipline deep dives are an event that we've been starting here at Inter Games, in which we specifically take a look at some entry-level jobs in the games industry. These entry-level jobs have been all well documented and listed in a little resource that we built alongside Bird's Eye View, called the entry-level games hub, scrolling down below me. If you go visit that website, entry-level.games, you will be able to learn a little bit about some of the common entry-level jobs in the games industry, a lot about their knowledges and their requirements and what they expect you to know going in, as supplied by people who do those jobs, who hire for those jobs, who have applied for those jobs. And then what we sort of looked at is we've gone, well, wait a second, these are the expectations of these jobs, but where do you get that information from if you don't already have it? So with these discipline deep dives, we look to basically take one of these subjects, one of those knowledges, those behaviors, those expectations, and ask someone to come and basically talk about that thing, help us understand what it is, what we can learn about it, what we can know about it, so that basically if you're trying to climb that entry level video games ladder, you've got a little bit of a better grip. I don't know how much further I can take that analogy without completely ruining ladders or my concept of general vertical progress. So who's going to deliver this talk? Well, it's not me. I don't work in quality assurance. I know nothing about this stuff. I'm pretty sure you just get a hammer and squash bugs. Right? Wrong. The person who's going to correct me on all of this is the most wonderful David Jenkins. David Jenkins, welcome to the Intergames Discipline Deep Dive stage. How are you?
Hi, Jonas. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much for being here. David, I alluded to the fact that I do not work in quality assurance. I know nothing about quality assurance. As I say, I'm pretty sure it's about squashing bugs in the most literal sense. So David, why don't you tell me why I'm wrong? What is quality assurance? And also, in the meantime, what is your relationship with quality assurance and the games industry? Who are you to deliver such a subject?
Who am I, indeed? I'll come on to what is quality assurance in a moment, and I'll start more with who am I. My name's David, pronouns he, him. For anyone struggling with visual issues, I'm a white, bald, ginger-bearded, glasses-wearing male in front of a slightly grey, boring background, plus an awesome... Wrong hand mirrored. Japanese poster for Rubber Drum, which is one of our games. I'm currently head of QA at Roll7. I started in the industry at Xbox Cert, testing Xbox 360 games and then eventually Xbox One games before they launched on the platform, and apps as well. That was a big thing at the time. Moved on to Sega, where I was head of compliance. Compliance lead, but I was running the compliance teams at Sega Europe. Briefly took a stint out of QA as release manager at Curve Digital, now Curve Games. And then for the last few years, I've been at Roll7, running the QA department as part of an embedded team. So I've done first party, I've done some third party, I've done publisher, and now I've done embedded dev QA. So I've done a little bit of everything.
was just going to say, what's left? What's left? Well, thank you so much for joining us, David. And yeah, you've got a sort of a wealth of experiences there in different backgrounds. Massive fan of your current work. You've got the cool Japanese poster over there. I've got the game installed on my PS5. We're so alike. No. But thank you so much for joining us. And so I said it earlier that these discipline deep dives or these events where basically we're going to sort of look at a singular part of a discipline. So this discipline in this case is, we would like to talk about quality assurance, but also we'd love to really kind of like, well, let's talk about a very specific element of quality assurance. And basically we've asked you to sort of come and help us with that, and you have prepared a wealth of information in the form of a presentation. So rather than sort of talk about it on anyone's behalf, I will give you your screen, and I'm going to rip myself away from the stage. To those of you in the audience, please do keep the chatter going. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in chat. If we've got time at the end, we will try and do a Q&A session. So do feel free to ask questions, and I will do my best to get them answered if we have time. Otherwise, just keep chatting, and basically I'll be in the audience with you. David, the floor is all yours.
Cool. I'm not scared at all. I will start by adding another little bit of information about me. So I'm autistic, and I also have ADHD. And this is the first time I've done one of these. So I was doing a little bit of stimming while Jonas was doing his lovely intro. I've got a script prepared, because otherwise I will go off on 7 million different tangents and we'll never get anywhere. And I will attempt to read it at a speed that humans can actually process. So bear with me. I'm going to try not to go too quickly through all of this. And we're going to start by answering that first question that Jonas asked in part 1, Introduction to QA Challenges, with what is QA? So I'm going to apologize again and assume that people don't know the answer to this question already. And I'm just going to start with the basics. So QA stands for quality assurance. Sometimes it might be called quality control or quality verification, although technically those are all different things. I'm actually part of a project that may be looking to rebrand it all so it sits under the umbrella of games quality. But more important than what the name is what it means. Now, the old school approach to QA is that we are responsible for making sure the game works. Jonas mentioned squashing bugs. Running test cases, which are little step-by-step testing guides that ask you questions like, if you press the jump button, do you jump? Do you jump high enough, far enough? Do you then fall down at the right speed, etc.? If the answer is yes, the test case passes. If the answer is no, it fails, and you write a bug report so someone knows to fix it. You do this for every single part of the game: levels, weapons, enemies, player controls, vehicles, menus, every sound effect, every visual effect, every part of the game world. Now, this is still part of our role, although usually it's more interesting than just jumping up and down. But AI and automation is starting to take on the more boring and repetitive bits, which frees us up to do the fun stuff, which is helping to make sure not just that the game works, but that it's actually good. Another big role of QA is risk mitigation, basically helping producers and game directors understand areas of the project that might be struggling and that might have an impact on budgets, timelines, etc. Nobody likes doing the delayed post of shame to the public. QA also often gets involved in research as well. This could be player research, putting early versions in the hands of actual players and gathering feedback, or it could be research on other games in the same genre, like COD researching Battlefield, or just games with similar features, trying to understand what worked or didn't for them and why. And lastly, although it's not part of QA, you will often find that QA help to create screenshots and videos for trailers, write player guides, show off the game at expos like EGX, or even, in my case, get to do some voiceover work and sea shanty singing. I'll explain that if anyone asks later. It's worth noting that there are several different types of QA as well, including functional, compliance, mobile, which is sort of a combination of the two, but specific to mobile and tablet games, and localization. Now, I apologize, I'll mainly be neglecting localization QA here, as theirs is a very specific discipline covering verifying translation and helping manage potential confusion caused by cultural differences. Like, for instance, translating jokes and puns in particular often means that they just don't land the same or at all. Hopefully that's transitioned to the next slide. Looks like it has. Cool. So, but QA aren't the only ones responsible for games quality. We're part of a team. Now, different publishers and developers, that's the people who pay for the game to be made and then sell it to players, and the people who actually make the game, will have different setups and may not all embed their QA teams as deeply as they should. But the ideal setup is that QA work really closely with everyone on the development team, or better yet, that they are just considered part of that team, because quality is everyone's responsibility. And in the same way that you might have a health and safety officer, but that doesn't mean that everyone else can just go around starting fires or blocking emergency exits. So in order of how much you tend to work with them, production. QA is often considered part of the production department. Producers oversee the entire project and make sure that everything is running smoothly, on budget and on time. They also prioritize what bugs are fixed and when. QA regularly report to production on the state of the build and help to flag areas of risk. For example, that new super move system is breaking enemy behavior and making the game too easy, might need revisiting. Programmers are the wizards that make everything in the game work, but as a result, usually more than half of your bugs will be because of something they've done or not done. Even the best programmers make mistakes, but more often it's because of some change to or misunderstanding about design, or the complex ways different systems being built by different programmers are overlapping and intersecting. Sometimes people just get excited and add something cool without thinking about the knock-on effects. On Rollerdrome, for instance, we logged about 15 bugs in less than 10 minutes, the moment someone thought it would be cool to use grenades to jump higher. It was, but it sent you out of levels and through ceilings and into areas you weren't meant to access. Now, if programmers make things, it's designers who decide what it is they're making. You get game designers, system designers, combat designers, level designers, UX designers, and more, all thinking up cool things to put in the game and fun ways to use them. Working with designers usually involves helping to maintain game balance, like no OP weapons making it too easy, no areas that are too hard to reach, no systems that are too difficult to understand, and flow around levels. Early on, you'll probably be testing what's called grey box levels, because everything is made out of placeholder grey blocks that let you test layouts and enemy placements without having to wait for the art department. Then, once everyone is happy that a level is fun, art can swoop in and make it look good. Speaking of which, working with the art teams and audio teams can sometimes be about simple things like there's a missing texture over here, or that sound effect isn't playing. But as we continue to move away from does it work to is it good, QA are increasingly involved in ensuring that animations feel responsive, that visual and audio feedback helps the player to understand what they're doing right or wrong, or even guides the player to the right path. Next time you're playing a game with any sort of lighting system, look out for that blinking bulb that happens to be above the door you're meant to go through, or notice how the music changes just before the boss jumps out of hiding. Not every game makes use of these systems, but many of them do. End of the line, yeah. So although QA are thankfully increasingly embedding deeper into teams, and the games industry is gradually adopting what's called a shift left mentality when it comes to quality, meaning getting QA involved earlier in the development process or further left on a typical production timeline, we are still ultimately responsible for a number of areas of game development where the buck stops with us. So while we aren't we aren't often the ones to make a final call on, for example, do we just pull that troublesome feature or do we stick with it? QA will be the ones providing the data and advice to the people who are making that decision. Again, usually production and game directors. A common challenge for QA then is dealing with last minute changes. Sometimes these changes are the results of a bug, the level select menu suddenly isn't working, but most often they are intentional. We've decided we only need 4 weapons, not 5, so we're removing the ice beam gun or whatever. Now, you might be thinking removing something is great, one less thing to test. But even this sort of change can have big knock-on effects. Has removing that weapon correctly updated the weapon select wheel to only have 4 slots now? Has every single one of the ice weapon ammo drops in the levels been removed? Does the tutorial for how to use it still pop up when you reach that bit of the game? Is game difficulty affected by the fact that you can no longer freeze some enemies in place? Can you still access that secret area that required you to freeze water to make a bridge? Hopefully, someone has already thought of all of that and everything will be fine. But even if they did, there's a chance that something will have gone wrong somewhere. And these sorts of decisions might happen just before a milestone delivery, or worse, a first-party submission. A quick aside on that, most game development is structured into milestones, for example, 6 weeks of work, which are sent to the publisher basically to say, look what I did, and have them go, that's great, here, have the next bit of money. It keeps everything moving at a nice pace for the development team and means the publishers are only paying for the devs to do the work if they're doing the work and it's up to standard. First party, that's Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, Epic, etc., also have their own standards that must be met before games are allowed to release on their platforms, which, as I said, is where I got my start in the industry at Xbox. Failing either of these submissions is a big deal, first party submissions most of all. Now, another challenge that we face is a lack of or insufficient documentation. Because part of our job is ensuring that everything works the way it's supposed to, you would have thought people would be clear about what everything is supposed to do, right? Well, sadly, no. Quite often, things are moving at such a rapid pace that decisions to tweak features can happen basically any time a designer or someone with some influence, like a publishing exec, plays the current build and goes, I don't like that. The priority then becomes changing whatever that thing is, squeezing the redesign time and the time for programmers, art, whoever to actually make the change into the schedule, and any time spent writing it all down in detail is forgotten. At one point on Rollerdrome, I did an audit of our design documentation to highlight the problem that was causing, sparked by the director saying, why is he shooting 3 rockets still? That should be 5 now, during an internal playtest. I discovered that not only was there no document that stated the warhead enemy should be shooting 5 rockets now, but that there were 3 separate documents about the warhead, all recently updated by different people, and all with slightly different designs, none of which matched what was in the game either. Now, I should stress that we won a BAFTA for Rollerdrome, so we obviously got there in the end, but we would have gotten there slightly easier with better documentation. An alternative to good documentation, although both would be better, is good communication. At Roll7, we're very fortunate to be deeply embedded with the rest of the dev team, getting involved in design calls and feature kickoff meetings, and this allows us to even pre-test things, calling out issues we see in the initial design ideas or the way systems overlap, so that the version that first lands in our lap already has a bunch of the kinks worked out, saving us time and effort reporting bugs, checking they're fixed, etc. Unfortunately, the less embedded your team are, the more likely they are to miss out on key information. I would estimate that a huge proportion of the issues QA teams around the world have are because someone wasn't clear about expectations, timelines, standards, etc. Some devs still have a chuck it over the fence mentality whereby QA aren't involved at all. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to learn that I and the games quality community as a whole don't like that chuck it over the fence approach where we're just given builds to test and aren't involved in the design process or able to give feedback beyond bugs. But how do we change that mindset? Fortunately, it's already changing overall, but there is still room for improvement. A big challenge is that means changing people's established views and routines. Now, as I said, I'm autistic, and there's a stereotype that we hate change more than anyone. But for me, it's that I don't like change that makes no sense to me. If you can explain why the change is important or is better in some way, I'm all in. And the same goes for neurotypicals, although it's worth noting that the games industry has a disproportionately high number of neurospicy people. We're taking over. One of the most common speed bumps on the road to changing people's mindset about QA is that people don't like to be criticized for the work that they've done, especially when they're super passionate about it. You know, crazy. One of the most common speed bumps on the road to changing people's mindsets about QA, that's a loop. I do apologize. There's a bug in the presentation. Where are I? So although people will largely handle bug reports professionally, because providing a list of issues with screenshots and videos as evidence is hard to argue against, the more I think this feedback can be seen as overly critical and or more easily dismissed as, but I know better. Of course, you do occasionally hit the odd by design or won't fix response, even to bugs. But for me, that demonstrates what I was saying earlier about needing greater clarity on intended design and standards. Another issue, that's not a bug, another issue can be speaking different languages. I don't mean Welsh or Mandarin, both of which I do speak a little of, but the different levels of understandings that we have about game systems. As a player, and even as an embedded tester, you might understand that there are different types of NPC. Some of them are friendly, some of them are enemies. But you might not understand that these are part of the same object class in the code, which with each individual NPC an instance of that class. However, this would be useful to know because it means that some basic functionality that works or doesn't for one NPC will almost certainly work or not for all the others. Because no matter what they look like in game, they are essentially the same few lines of code running in the back end. While I've been talking, has anyone Googled what that says in binary? It just says, pardon? Don't worry, no one will expect you to speak binary, unless they're a tech priest. So, how do we fix it? Well, it's genuinely a big challenge in the industry. I was attending Qualicon, the annual games quality conference, earlier this month, and this was literally the topic of one of the roundtables. One of the test leads at Sega was posing that question to everyone so that we could brainstorm some ideas. And that wasn't just a casual chat. This was one of the official panels on the schedule. So it's obviously an issue, and it's obviously an area that needs some work. One of the things I suggested, and which was generally agreed on, was that collaborating early makes a big difference. There are some principles of management around engaging your team in any task you might be giving them by involving them in the decision-making process early on. And those same principles apply here. Rather than dropping a big pile of feedback on a designer's metaphorical desk after they've been working on a new feature for months, speak to them as they start on the feature about what sort of feedback, suggestions, examples from other games, bugs, would be most useful to them and at what points in the design process. For example, if you just started designing the menu system, you don't need someone from QA coming in and listing all of the menu items and submenus that are missing. Of course they're missing. I haven't added them yet. But what you might find useful is some examples of menus layouts from other similar games. Once you've got some layouts ideas and have everything set in the submenus, etc., then you might want QA to come in and help ensure that everything is where it should be and that it all makes sense. And only after that, once programmers have actually built the menus and put them into the game, would you want any bugs to come back, although these would probably be for the programmers at that stage. If this process is laid out before the work starts, the feedback you give, as long as you stick to what was agreed, will be much more readily received and therefore much more likely to actually be taken on board. But don't just tell people what you're going to do. Involve them. Ask them what they want and when. Make suggestions on what you think might be helpful and remind them that you're only trying to help ensure quality because that's your job, not because you don't think they can do it. People generally don't like to be told what to do, but they will usually appreciate help in doing a good job. My role as head of QA involves a constant iterative cycle similar to game development itself of working with other department heads to ensure that as a studio, we're making the most of our awesome QA team. And they really are awesome. We were shortlisted for the first ever Games Quality Team Award, and although we didn't win, it was so close we got a special mention after the award was announced. And finally, upskill yourself. I already mentioned how useful it can be when testing to actually understand how different parts of the game are made. If you know how it's made, you can more easily figure out how to break it. So learn about game design, UX design, I'll touch on that a bit later, programming, 3D modeling, level design, audio systems. You don't have to be an expert, but even a basic knowledge can be put to good use in your testing and in your communication and collaboration with the respective departments. And upskill them too. Show people your testing process, your bug tracking system, the tools you use. They will get a better appreciation for what you do, but programmers in particular might be able to enhance it with tools and debug features, automation scripts, and more. Making a game is a group effort, so work together. Retrospectives, basically a look back at everything that went well or didn't on a particular part of a project, are a great place for this. If you're not doing them, ask your producer to get them organized. And run your own within QA too. There's no downside to sharing knowledge, ideas, techniques, and insights within the team. Finally, upskill your own communication skills. Learn about the various feedback models, communication styles, personality types, etc., so you can more easily and effectively get your point across. This is also super important the further up the ladder you go, as you become a lead, a manager, and all the way up to being head of or director. Excuse me. Oh, right. I already mentioned how things can change at any moment and about retrospectives and iterative cycles, but I'm going to bring them up again here. That iterative cycle means a constant rotation between thinking of something, trying it out, gathering feedback on it, and incorporating that feedback into the next version. It's how most games, and for that matter, any product you care to think of, are made. But it's also a great tool for improving our own processes within QA. At the start of the project, someone, typically a lead or higher, will create a test plan, which outlines all the different testing methodologies, tools, reporting systems, resources, etc., that will be used on the project. And just like the project schedule and the game design document, these are live documents. They can, and I'd argue should, be constantly updated. Games can take years to make, so with both software and hardware becoming more powerful practically on a weekly basis, there's no sense in sticking to old plans. Now, I love having a good plan in place, but I used to teach kickboxing, and one of my boss's favorite quotes from Mike Tyson was, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." Basically, very few plans survive contact with the real world wholly intact, and that's fine. Part of that flexibility comes in the way that you work. I've already mentioned that different types of feedback might be more or less useful at different stages of development on a particular feature or on the game as a whole. So think about the way that feedback is being presented. The bread and butter of QA is still bug reports, typically in some kind of tracking software like Jira, Bugzilla, Redmine, there's tons of them out there. But that doesn't mean it's the best format for all of your feedback. For one thing, there's a fear among producers and leads that anything added to such tracking software will be viewed as a bug that needs fixing. But while we'd like to think we know what we're talking about, some of our more qualitative feedback, like this feels too fast or that damage value feels too low, isn't a call we have the authority to make. So adding it to Jira, for instance, could accidentally add more weight to it, meaning someone fixes it without checking the design first. Or it adds less weight to actual bugs because everything starts being seen as your opinion rather than simple fact. So make use of slide presentations, spreadsheets, talk-through videos, a barbershop quartet, interpretive dance, whatever you think will get your specific point across to the right people in the best way. You might even be able to get some help from other teams like art for visuals or marketing for consumer data to help really sell it. Sorry, I missed a click there. And finally, coming right back to the iterative loop, the part about trying it out. This is a huge part of the way Roll7 makes games. At least once per week, the whole team, designers, artists, programmers, testers, narrative writers, production, and even the studio heads will sit on a call. We're remote, but you can do it in a room if you have one big enough, and just play the game. Sometimes it's useful to have someone playing on the big screen, usually from QA, and someone taking notes of people's thoughts. Again, you can volunteer for this. But weirdly, having the team actually play and talk out loud about their experiences, not all at once, is hugely beneficial. And bizarrely, not nearly as common as you might think. That Sega lead from Qualicon suggested it to one of the dev teams that they were working with and was asked, why would we want to do that? I could hear the collective facepalm from everyone on the call, even with their mics muted. It makes such a difference to people's understanding of the game they're making, the challenges facing different departments, the wins that team members have had in solving those challenges, and the general sense of collaboration, not just with QA, but with each other. On to part 3. Games quality professionals must be one thing above all else: adaptable. Partly because it's a discipline that is still largely misunderstood within the industry, and partly because that has led people to view it as not unskilled, but less skilled. There is a tendency for people further up the pipeline not to worry about the way their work impacts on QA. This isn't malicious, at least you'd hope not, but it does mean that you must be ready for things to change at a moment's notice, if that. If you're at a big studio or publisher, this could mean being moved around or added to different projects. There was one day at Sega where I was actively leading 6 different test teams. It took me 45 minutes just to send all of my end-of-day reports. It could mean developing for a new platform. The publisher have decided that they want a Switch version after all. Genuinely happened to me once. It could mean massive shifts in game direction. It's a MOBA now. Not happened to me, but it has been done. And so on. That means ensuring that any plan you have is flexible enough to take big changes in its stride, or that you have a backup. I was reading one of the Warhammer 40k books, and it had this great quote from Lazarus: "The strongest foundation of any plan is another plan," which I thought was amazing. A little pessimistic maybe, but then he is a dark angel. So now, part of that flexibility in your plans and processes should be around adopting different testing methodologies at appropriate times in the life cycle of each feature. It would be great if every feature could be at the same stage of development at the same time. There would be much less bouncing around, but then it would also be a lot less interesting. But typically, some features will be nearing feature completion, while others are still in prototype, especially if there's been a big shift in direction. This means you could be doing some simple baseline functionality checklists on one feature while deep diving into some serious destructive testing on another. Just as different types of feedback suit different stages of feature development, so too do different ways of testing. And in turn, that difference in testing method will likely produce those different types of feedback. In those examples, the former will just be a simple tick at the end to say that a new feature is at least working as intended, which is to say that you've not tried to break it yet, but you've confirmed it's there and functioning as designed, while the latter would potentially form part of a temperature gauge for a feature area, confirming that it appears robust and listing any bugs that you did manage to find. Finally, in an effort to avoid the can't see the wood for the trees phenomenon, it's a good idea to rotate your team every now and then. While you will want a lead and maybe a senior to stay largely focused on one project, giving everyone a break, even if it's only for a week, by putting them on a different project can be a great chance for them to rejuvenate and come back energized, while bringing new people into the project will give you different perspectives and fresh eyes and ears. This often means bugs and feedback being reported for issues that the original team had long since stopped seeing. For example, because they're for a feature that hasn't been worked on for a long time, and so at this point, their brain just goes, it's always been like that. Part of the problem with the thankfully diminishing view of QA being somehow lesser than other disciplines in games is that it can be difficult to find the confidence needed to stand up for yourself. That's not to say that you'll be bullied, but there will be a real sense that QA just need to get on with the work and say nothing, even if the expectations on that work are unreasonable. Crunch, something I absolutely refuse to allow on my teams, is a terrible buzzword in the industry that refers to working intense and long hours for an extended period of time, sometimes months, or worse, years, in order to meet deadlines. Sadly, it does happen, and some people are fine with it, but it should be avoided where possible. And the best way to avoid it is to plan to avoid it. Again, getting ahead of expectations, timelines, budgets, and resources, i.e. how many people you have, can have a huge impact on workload. Be honest about what is reasonable, make adjustments to your test plan, and continue to feed back on workload. If you've planned accordingly, there should always be enough people and hours in the day to get things done. But if there aren't, go back to the producer and discuss it. But of course, as I may have mentioned, things change. Feature creep is another phenomenon in games. Basically, the industry is forever evolving and new trends spring up out of nowhere all the time. Some designers can end up trying to shoehorn new features into existing game designs in order to stay current. This generally means there's more work to do in the same amount of time, which in turn means that something has to give. Production should be able to guide you in terms of what is and isn't a priority so that you can focus your efforts on the most relevant features. But remember that part of your job
Hello. Yes, have you just seen the message? I wasn't sure if it was just me where the audio had went, but I can see people in chat saying lost audio. So I'll give David a moment to see. Test, there we go. Oh, and everyone can hear my mic. Right, yes, I can hear you now, David.
Fantastic. I don't know where I dropped off.
You were.
I'll start that whole bullet point again, shall I?
Yeah, standing your ground, understand priorities. Yeah, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. All right, I'm going to disappear. Bye.
Cool. Understanding priorities, take 2, click. Right. But of course, as I may have mentioned, things change. Feature creep is another phenomenon in games. Basically, the industry is forever evolving and new trends spring up out of nowhere all the time. Some designers can end up trying to shoehorn new features into existing game designs in order to stay current. This generally means there's more work to do in the same amount of time, which in turn means that something has to give. Production should be able to guide you in terms of what is and isn't a priority so that you can focus your efforts on the most relevant features. But remember that part of your job is also to inform those decisions on priority. So be ready to provide some data and insights into areas that need shoring up or areas that are actually quite stable and can probably be left in peace for a bit. The sad truth of games quality is that not everything will get fixed. And that can be tough to stomach, especially on projects that you love. But accepting that is important. And understanding where your efforts can have the most impact is essential. As is accepting that as long as you report the issues and send up flares when things are going wrong, any problems with the final product aren't on you. Now, knowing what you're going to do and knowing that it might change is, of course, super useful. But just as useful is remembering what you're doing now and what you've already done. This helps to avoid repeated work, makes it clear what needs to be done next, helps when bringing new people into the team, and gradually builds a heat map of coverage on the project so you know nothing is missed and everything gets the attention it deserves. There are a ton of ways to keep track of your testing efforts. The most common is the TMS, or Test Management System. It is the home of all of your test cases, test runs, which are groups of test cases being run on a particular build or feature, and generally comes with a lot of simple reporting tools. However, this is generally for use exclusively by QA and often isn't very well suited to tracking the overall test progression on a project long term. Coming back to your collaboration with producers, you might want to find a solution that allows them a quick glance way to see where you're at. For example, simple spreadsheets can be used to make note of what levels contain what elements and whether those elements are ready for test, have been tested, if they have any related bugs, etc. Kanban boards are another great way to visualize progress as they arrange things into neat columns like to do, in progress, blocked, in review, and done. They generally allow you to assign specific tasks to particular people, can contain info on those tasks, and allow them to flow in either direction. Essentially the same as a bug report too. In fact, using Jira for Agile project management is basically just using it as one very complex Kanban board. One of the specialisms within QA I've not touched on too much, partially because it's not something I have much experience with myself, is quality engineers, or SDETs, software developers in test. These code-fluent testers are responsible for creating and managing automated testing scripts, as well as testing and debugging tools, although sometimes this will be handled by the main programming team. Debug tools and debug commands have a wide range of uses, from being able to pinpoint your exact location in a level, outputting an X, Y, and Z coordinates to make it easier to let designers know where to find an issue, to God modes, game speed settings, enemy and item spawning, etc. In fact, a large proportion of the cheats that can be found, especially in older games, and in particular the ones entered in command line tools within the game, were probably debug tools used for testing that the developers decided to leave in the final version. even some of the accessibility features in Rollerdrome, again, things like infinite ammo, infinite reflex time, were in fact debug testing features. There are also external tools that can make things easier. Microsoft's Xbox GDK includes tools for connecting to local consoles in order to grab screenshots and videos, or debug output, which are lines of pseudocode that get spat out in the game encounters a code error. Programmers love these. And even freely available tools like OBS can be lifesavers, especially the always recording system that lets you hit a button and save footage of a thing that just happened, because a bug can strike when you least expect it. Whoops, sorry, too far back, there we are. But of course, as I may have mentioned, things change. No, wait, sorry. Oh, I do apologize. That's the wrong bit of the script. I don't know where the script has gone now. Oh, that's because I'm on the wrong slide. Come on. Technical error.
Can I assist at all?
I don't think so. I think the slides are just broken. I'm just going to read out the last bit, and you'll just have to remember what it said on the screen. I do apologize. But looking to the future, there is a lot of evolution on the horizon, from further development into QA, into the QA engineer and test automation specializations on one side, to testing against accessibility requirements and usability heuristics as part of a broader adoption of UX, which is user experience design, in the industry as a whole. Working more closely with testing teams to gather feedback from user testing teams, to gather feedback from real players and incorporate it into the iterative design process is another exciting area that QA are getting more involved with. And I'm sure there will be even more ideas coming soon. So overall, there is a lot to be excited about in the game's quality and plenty to sink your teeth into, which is the actual end. So I don't know why it's gone all skew-if, but there we are. Apologies for the bugs in my presentation.
It's fine. I think we'll ask everyone for a sort of a bug report and some.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just stick it all in Jira. That's fine. Just assign it all to me, and I'll get it looked at.
Exactly. Everyone who's an active participant, please open your Jira boards and get working. No, thank you so much for all of that, David. Really wonderful stuff. Really in depth. A lot of like insight and extra information there. Just great all around. Thank you so much. To those of you in chat, thank you for all your chit chat throughout the entire thing. I know that some of you have been asking questions from pretty much the get-go, and we've got time. We've got time for some questions. We've got about 15 minutes until we hit the hour. So what I'll do is I'm gonna cherry pick some questions out from chat, and I'm gonna be firstly I'd just like to start from the top, just so that any questions that were asked early on have a fighting chance. And then what I do is, just as we're running out of time, I just try and cherry pick questions that feel particularly like they touch on a new subject, or like they could potentially just have a large impact with the remaining amount of time. One of the earliest questions asked in chat is asked by Danny Watson, who's watching on LinkedIn. Thank you, Danny Watson. I can bring it up on the screen, actually. Danny Watson has asked the question, when you said embedded QA, what does that mean, like, at a hardware level? So I suppose there's a little bit of a question there, which is, if I didn't know what is embedded QA in a sentence, and then do you want to just talk a little bit about, like, what do those teams work in terms of hardware? Are they working from particular consoles, PCs, builds, etc.?
Great. So hi, Danny. So embedded QA is a quality team that is part of the development team itself. So I mentioned that my first start in QA was at First Party, which was working at Xbox. We had absolutely nothing to do with the developers. We had essentially nothing even to do with the publishers. We were working on behalf of Xbox themselves to test against set requirements. So we were not in any way embedded. When I was at Sega, there was sort of a mix of things, which is slightly more confusing, but we were publisher QA. Again, we might liaise a little bit with the developers, but that was usually happening above our heads. And our responsibility was testing on behalf of Sega, on behalf of the publisher, to say, yes, this meets our standards, this is good, this is it, this is that. Whereas where I am now at Roll7, we're very much involved in the development effort itself. So we're working directly with programmers and artists and designers and what have you, to help make the game as good as it can possibly be, as well as obviously finding all of the bugs and things. So it's not necessarily to do with hardware. Usually you would be working on, PCs, laptops, etc. But sometimes dev kits, special versions of the Xbox kit, PlayStation kit, Switch kit, etc. That you can connect to, and you can run various tools through and all sorts of other things that just make testing easier, basically. But you would probably be using those regardless of where you sit, whether you're embedded or not.
Brilliant, thanks for that. I'm just going to swap us round so that I can make you big on the screen when you answer a question. I don't mean to dazzle anyone there. Thank you for that. Someone asked like a really great question, which was, I suppose, to do with. I'm sure this is a frustration you felt before, and audience members obviously feel it every time it happens. Dan Tonkin asks, why aren't publishers listening to QA teams on huge game titles like a Madden or a Cyberpunk 2077 before they release them? And there's an implicit bit of information there that isn't said, which is these are games that famously release with not just like a couple of bugs, but it feels like the entirety of the experience. You know, when you're a consumer and you see these games come out and the only news about these games is their bugs and how much they seem to be impacting the player experience. Yeah, what do you feel is like some of the kind of common most reasons why those either can't be addressed or don't get addressed? You know, why do those games commonly release in that state?
So to answer the question more directly in terms of why don't publishers listen, I would like to think that they do. They are listening as a general rule. They are aware. And it often just comes down to time, prioritizing, budgets, awkward situations where we've already told people the game's coming out at this date and we can't push it back any further because we've already delayed it twice. You know, those sorts of things, right? As I said, things change, stuff happens, things go wrong. The point of a truly embedded QA team is to try and stop those things from happening too often or at all. One of the things I can say, for example, at Roll 7 is we've maintained for the last 4 years a no-fail streak. That's not to say that we've not had bugs. There will always be bugs. But every single milestone, every single first-party submission has passed first time, on budget. However, that basically doesn't happen. We have done it. I don't know how we have done it, but we have done it. But it's such a rarity, right? Making games is so complicated, and especially really big games, especially really big budget games. I'm not necessarily excusing the states that some games get released in. Those were 2 examples. There are many more. But I think as a general rule, the problem will come down less to they're not listening or they don't know that these problems exist, and more to we're going to have to just kind of deal with it and hope that we can get a patch out or whatever, basically, unfortunately. There will be an element of probably of not listening, but I don't want to say arrogance, but like an element of, yes, QA, that's very nice of you to say, you can sit down and be quiet now. I do feel that does sometimes happen. I'd hate to say it, but hashtag not all publishers. But it will happen sometimes, I would imagine. It will be a case of, look, we've got bigger things to worry about than this thing that you're worrying about. Let us do the big picture stuff, basically. But as I said, if you as QA have done your job, if you've told people, if you've reported it, if you've poked production about it, if you've sent up flares, if you've lit the beacons of Gondor and done everything you possibly can, it's not on you.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like you imagine that everyone that sort of was part of those projects was doing their darned best.
Absolutely. And I should say, I mentioned retrospectives earlier. There is this, what's it called? The retrospective prime directive, which is not the same as the Starfleet prime directive. But we all agree to work on the assumption that everyone did the best that they could with the information, tools, time, etc., available to them at the time. And so that's a really important part of that retrospective thing, is that it's not a blame game. It's not a you weren't doing good enough, or a where was this thing when I asked for it. It's none of that, because that's not a fun work environment to just be throwing out accusations around. So.
Exactly, and especially when we're trying to fight that culture of throw it over the wall, and it's like it's the blame game's really easy if you can point at the people over there and say, well, they're not part of us, so it's throw the blame over the wall as well, which is obviously not a lovely thing to be part of.
No.
But anyways, on a more positive note, got some more questions from the chat. Mags the writer has asked, are there any particular nuances to be considered when you're doing QA in a small team where there might not be a particular person or even team that is, the quality assurance individual? So I suppose it's a shared responsibility amongst other discipline, focused individuals. Is there anything?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's sort of cheating in my answer to the question, but my answer to that question is don't be in that situation where you don't have anyone who's responsible for QA. I see it a lot at the minute. New studios opening up and new teams kicking off, and we're obviously in a weird place in the industry right now. I'm not going to ignore that, but there are some positives and things are happening. But the vast majority of what I'm seeing we're hiring 17 programmers and 34 artists and 12 this and whatever this, and one QA tester, or even no QA testers. And I'm looking at it going, I don't really know how you're going to do that, but all right, good luck. Small teams, teams without much QA. I mean, I will say everyone needs their work QA'd, right? Nobody is perfect. People will make mistakes. It's the same reason why you proofread things. Ironically, it's the reason why I ran through this talk at least 3 times before doing this today, and it still went wrong, right? So, things happen. Things go wrong for one reason or another. In terms of like nuance, I don't know. I mean, if you're not going to have like an actual QA team, I would suggest making sure that someone is checking your work. And that goes for everybody on the team. Someone needs to be checking everybody's work, rotate around, have some kind of complicated metric system, whatever you want to do. But make sure that if you're the writer, someone is proofreading your stuff. If you're the designer, someone is checking that your designs make sense. And try and make sure that it's not someone who is necessarily a direct stakeholder in that thing. So if you're the programmer who's going to be programming the thing that the designer has said, obviously you want to be feeding back on, I'm not going to be able to do this, or this doesn't make a huge amount of sense. But having a neutral set of eyes looking at it as well would also be really, really useful. Because again, different perspectives, different ideas, it makes such a difference to be able to kind of step back from the thing and do that kind of outside the box look at it. That would be my suggestion. If there's more specific things, my LinkedIn is on there at the end. I'm sure we can get it back as well. I'm happy to answer any questions outside of this chat as well.
Yeah, I'll pull that up once we've answered our final question.
That's fine.
With only a few minutes left to the hour, I am like so aware of the time, and I can see that there are probably more questions that we can answer, everyone. And I am really, really apologetic about that. But there's a common thread in a lot of these questions, and so there's not any one specific question that touches this point. So I'm going to sort of ask it on everyone's behalf, which is there's a lot of questions about getting into QA. Nailing interviews as a QA, get entry-level roles about QA, what should I learn if I want to do QA, etc., etc., etc. So I guess really let's ask sort of a little bit of a topic about what is the square zero for QA? I don't know anything. How do I get to square one, and then square two, and then square three? How do I progress? And then in particular, what should I be teaching myself when I'm not doing that job? But I want to do that job. What should I be bringing into my applications and my interviews? What are some of the keywords or skills, etc., that would make me shine as a potential applicant in this kind of environment?
Sure. So apologies for the quickie chat. First of all, in terms of we're going for junior QA roles, right? So I've done a lot of hiring for junior QA roles, publisher level, role 7 level, etc. The one thing that I personally, and again, this is just me, the one thing that I personally want to see more than anything else is just passion, right? Passion for games, passion for the industry, passion for quality as just a concept, right, within games. Just, everything else, if you want to do it, I can teach you to do it, right? If you come to me with a whole load of skills, but I don't feel like you're someone who really wants to be doing the work, that's going to be a much bigger turnoff. You can have degrees in computer science. You can have done every quality assurance course under the sun. And I'll go, that's all very impressive, but I don't think you actually want to be here doing this thing with me. And so that's going to put me right off. As I said, so much more interested in you wanting to do the work and having an obvious drive for it than having every qualification under the sun. Having said that, in terms of some skills and things, I mean, I mentioned about there seems to be this sort of I won't say split, because I don't think it's necessary that we go off in different directions. I think it's just a spectrum. But with sort of QA engineers on one side, where you're practically a coder, but with a very quality, focused mindset, and your responsibility is around, testing and automation and those sorts of things. And the user experience and user testing and accessibility. I saw some people asking about accessibility in there because I mentioned it. The more sort of human side of it, I suppose. If you can demonstrate one side or the other, obviously, if you're going for a relevant role, QA engineer is its own separate role. And some places, I think I saw someone mention asking about accessibility testing. Some places that is what they do. I know Keywords have got a new thing that they do, like a new offering that's all around accessibility testing. Then great. If you're going for a more sort of generic role and you can demonstrate both, even better. So learn a bit of programming if that's your sort of inclination, or learn about UX design. Learn about player psychology and usability heuristics and all of these other fancy buzzwords that sound cool. Because for me, they're super interesting. That's my current neurospicy hyper focus, but they're also really useful for the job. So those would be my sort of two opposite ends of the spectrum, I suppose. But as I said right at the start, learn about how art assets are made, learn about audio, learn about level design, learn about just learn about the process, right? Because really big places, you might have art testers, you might have people who that's your job, right? You test the art assets and that's all you do. But there are very few really, really big places that will have that as their sort of team setup. So you're going to have to be a bit more of an, jack of all trades, basically.
Yeah, I think.
I hope that answered the question.
I hope that, yeah. There's a lot of different questions in chat, but I feel like we haven't really touched on that, like, what does the door to QA even look like? So I think it'd just be nice to talk about that. But I think we have hit 5 o'clock, 5:01, and I do want to try and make sure that these events are nice and timely. Just so that if you're coming into this resource and you've only got like a 1 hour lunch break, you can try and get everything out of it. But two, to respect your time, David, because you volunteered your time with us, and thank you so much, and so respectful and like impressed with all the information that you've prepped for this and for joining us here at Into Games. And just so everyone can get away and have a little bit of a nice Wednesday afternoon or evening. So first of all, what I'll just say is I'll bring up your screen one more time, because you did share in the bottom right there. That is your LinkedIn there, David Jenkins 22. So if you're looking for David on LinkedIn, you want to connect, add that to the URL of LinkedIn, and I'm sure the internet wizards will conjure up some kind of profile.
They'll figure it out.
Exactly. The internet will figure it out, exactly. And if you've got any questions that you feel were not answered here today and you want to ask them to a wider community, let's say, of people, do jump into the Into Games Discord. The Into Games Discord, it's got over 8,000 people in it. Many of those are either career seekers just like yourself, but many of them are also juniors and industry professionals with years on their their belt who are more than happy to jump in and answer a cheeky little question. The community is incredibly knowledgeable. We've got knowledgeable moderators. We've got me. I don't know what I am, but I work
And
very
me,
hard.
I'm in there as well. So
You're in there as
yeah,
well,
if
David.
you do have a really burning question for me, then you can also ask me in there if that's what you want.
Amazing. No, it's a great community. I say that but a little bit because I'm biased, but also because it's my job to make it a great community. So just it is the results of my work recently that partially make it a great community, but the most of it comes from you guys, the community. Jump in there if you are not already a member. I highly recommend it as a resource. Thank you to everyone who has joined us from YouTube and LinkedIn. Thank you for all of your questions. Thank you for all of your chatter. As I say, I'm sorry that we haven't got around to everything today, but just trying to make sure that we're good on time, and I got to go get a bus soon, so it's also a little bit self-serving. If you're watching this far in the future, I hope this has been a great resource for you and that you've been able to take away some wonderful learnings from it. And I think that's the gist of it, everyone. Thank you again, everyone in chat. I can see all your lovely words. Thank you for all your positive words. David, do you have anything that you just want to say at the final end of this? You mentioned earlier, for example, like QU ADHD, which I believe is a community that you're part of. Is that something that you'd like to do, like a little shout out, or just mention?
Yeah, I can do. So it's actually at the moment it's more just an article series covering my experiences working within QA within games as someone with autism and ADHD. So I cover a little bit of QA stuff and game stuff and a little bit of what it's like to have a neurospicy brain. At the moment, it's a LinkedIn article series that may expand into other things. I have started doing voiceovers for it as well to make it more accessible. So they're available on SoundCloud. But yeah, that's QAUDHD. Just rolls off the tongue. Yeah, they might end up in YouTube and all sorts of other things eventually if I get around to it, basically. But yeah, do have a read and let me know what you think of that. I'm always looking for more questions and topics to cover as well. So yeah, thanks.
Amazing. And with that, everyone, I'm going to bring the event to an end there. The sort of the video, the live stream will end very abruptly when I click this button. So just one more time for myself, Jonas, thank you for joining us. It's been really wonderful to have you here. David, thank you so much for all the learnings and for sharing everything that you know. I look forward to seeing what you get up to future projects. I look forward to your first your streak of no problem QA delivery things being maintained forever and ever and ever. Amen.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone, and join us next week, same time, not the same time, probably 1 p.m. next Wednesday. 1 p.m. next Wednesday for a level design discipline deep dive. I do have a speaker for that, but I will put all the details into our Discord and LinkedIn's later this week. So keep an eye on that if you're interested in level design. Thanks again. Bye bye.